we are explaining all these pitfalls to you. So don't take it as like negativity or complaining from our end. It's just we can do such a better job and we can serve you and your songs better if you follow these things that Jacob and us have tried to describe in this episode. So
exactly.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedictine, and I'm here as always with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. Today, I'm super excited to tell you that we're not alone. We are joined by the amazing Mr. Jacob Hansen. This is super exciting. Jacob is a musician and a Grammy Award-nominated music producer and mixing and mastering engineer. He's worked with some of the biggest names in metal and alternative music. You're probably familiar with his work if you're listening to this type of music. He's worked with bands like Volbeat, Primal Fear, the Black Dahlia Murder, Fleshgod Apocalypse, Evergrey, Heaven Shall Burn, and many, many more. So this is super exciting. We get to pick Jacob's brain today on all things recording. We talk specifically DIY recording, of course. We are talking about the challenges of working with bands who record themselves. We talk about guitar tone because, like, if you've heard Jacob's work, he's amazing at crafting super exciting guitar tones. We talk about that, and we have all like so many questions in our minds. I can't wait to get into this. I'm super excited. And first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time, Jacob. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and you're so welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I'm curious, is it even correct that you are sometimes working with DIY bands, or is that very rare still these days for you?
No, for sure. I do a lot of very different, well, both mixing jobs and also just, producing just bits and pieces of a record. It doesn't have to be, or, maybe they come here to do the drums and they continue somewhere else, maybe at home, in a bedroom or whatever, in an office, playing guitars or tracking bass and vocals. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. Luckily, these days, it's possible. I love that. Right. And it's not only, I do work with a lot of bigger bands, but I also take in smaller bands, as long as it's cool and I like the people and the music, I'm totally fine. It doesn't matter. It can be equally satisfying, really, to do really DIY projects as well. So it's all good.
That's cool to hear. Is it like how important is the quality of those recordings to you? Like, let's say the budget is okay and the people are cool, but like you've heard the demos or the raw recordings, and it's not really what you're used to working with when you produce yourself or when someone does it well. I imagine that with a portfolio like yours, you got to be careful, like to have, you got to be careful that the results are at a certain level all the time. Like you probably can't have an amateur sounding thing in between all the great sounding stuff you do. So has there been ever an occasion where you refused to work on a record or a song, even though you've liked the people and the budget was fine, just because the quality was not there for some reason?
Yeah, no, I don't recall anything where I went like, no, this is never going to work. But I've had, I've received files that were like where I went, oh shit, this is, the guitars are so noisy, or there's something really wrong with this DI signal, or, oh, maybe you forgot to change the bass strings, which is a classic.
Yeah.
All these things. And it totally makes sense because I mean, I've been doing this for so many years and I do this every day. And these bands maybe do it, maybe it's their first time and they've,
totally.
They have no experience whatsoever, just a little. Maybe they read a lot of weird things on the internet, like some parts true and some not so true. And they start working, and it's cool. And I can kind of see myself in the beginning, how I was, it was trial and error, fumbling about and just doing stuff and not knowing what I did. And I couldn't really, how you can't really tell what's actually important. Is it, I mean, is it important to edit the guitars really heavily and be like, oh yeah, I edited for 5 days, and then well, the strings were like half a year old. So what's the point of the perfect editing? But you know what I mean. It's really it's a little tough. So I try to, whenever I feel like there's something that could be an issue, I try to talk to the bands, and if they want, we can go on a Skype call or whatever, a FaceTime call, and yeah, we can discuss it. But normally I just send them a mail, like, remember these things, and this is very, very important. And other times it's like, it's maybe, well, we're recording drums, they're telling me, and it's in our rehearsal room, and do you think these $100 mics are okay? And I'm like, yes, but it's not only about the mics. It's you know how difficult it is to record a drum set, and I've been doing that for 30 years, and I'm not even done with that. I'm experimenting and learning all the time. So it's tough. It's not just something that you just jump right into. Well, you can, but there's gonna be a lot of things that you don't know, and there'll be some pitfalls, and you'll do stupid things and spend tons of time on things that maybe wasn't so cool. So but you also you're asking me if I ever said, hey, stop, this is stupid. But I don't think so. I think we saved stuff, or I just called the band and said, well, there's something wrong, your guitars are so noisy, what's happening? And they'll be showing me, oh, this is where the cable goes, and all of a sudden I see, oh, well, this old screen that you have there, or maybe the cable is near some power source, or
right.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. So we figured out at the end.
Okay, so there's definitely guidance needed, because how should people know, right? As you said, like, when they just starting out.
Yes, yeah. And other times people are actually pretty good at it, and you get, I mean, not surprised, but you're like, wow, okay, so this is very, very good. They don't need an external engineer, and it's just all fine. Or but also, a thing that I sometimes tell these bands is like, maybe if you know some engineer in your area, or there's somebody you can say, hey, can you come over? We'll pay you for 2 hours, and you can help us set this up. And maybe there are some stuff that you want to tell us that we should not do. It's so well worth spent that money. And I think it seems like some people are fine with this, and some are more like, no, we can do everything ourselves. This is gonna be
right.
And then maybe not.
Learn the hard way.
That's true.
Starting to find that I'm having a change of opinions, a little paradigm shift, where drums, I think, are the hardest thing to engineer, right? To get drums to sound just how you want them on the way in is really, like you said, it's a lifetime learning thing. We'll never stop. And we'll always be chasing some new technique or some new sound in our head, right? But at the same time, the power of mixing drums, especially in hard genres, has become very powerful. So I'm finding that as long as there's some good rooms and good overheads, or even just good overheads, I can really make a slamming drum sound in a mix happen if the playing's good, right? So what I'm starting to realize is that guitars are actually becoming the thing that I'm like, how do we fix this? This is like the most commonly screwed up thing for bands in a repairable way. And it's either, like you said, noise, like just like outrageous noise, or it's guitar tuning, which is something that Benny and I just talk about at nonstop length on this podcast is guitar tuning. And I've been trying to figure out a way to like communicate that, and it seems like some people can hear it and some people can't. So I'm wondering if you've encountered that and how you've tried to get around it in a situation where you're not able to be there engineering and making sure that guitar is in tune, which is a lot of what we do as engineers.
It's rough. I mean, I've even shit. Because I've even had bands where I went like, oh, you know what could be a step up from your last album? If you borrow or you go out and buy a guitar with Evertune and you play all the rhythmic, the rhythm parts or the basic parts on that, and they'll be like, sure, that's such a cool thing. And then I get the files and it's still fucking out of tune. And I'm like,
it's impossible.
But it's something that I've also seen. I'm not saying people are stupid, but it's just there's also a little bit of how you have to develop your ear of how, when is the guitar in tune, and that's a little like, of course there's a scientific way of telling, well, this is in tune or it's not, but there's also a little bit of taste. People will be like, yeah, this is really in tune, and I'll be like, nah, no, or you know what I mean. So sometimes it can be a little. I mean, even when I'm working with people in the studio and I'm like, no, that chord's not in tune, and they tune in tune, and they're like, oh yeah, and I'm like, nah, no. I feel like the conductor in Whiplash, not quite my tempo, but yeah. and they're like, yeah, now, and I'm like, no, but and this is a thing that, how can you teach people that? And so I'm actually, I'm so hoping that someday it'll work, that you can, tune polyphonic material, because those rhythm guitars, if it's not just bang on, it's gonna suck all the way through the record, and that's gonna make everyone's life so hard. And like you're saying with drums, I've received stuff where where I went, this is not even drums. This is the loudest hi-hat in the world, bleeding into everything. So I'm like, okay, but there's that's a way of dealing with that. I can easily fix that. It's not a good starting point, obviously. It makes no sense, and it takes me 2-3 days to fix that, which is like, why are you even why are we but like you're saying, that has been, I mean, that there are ways to fix this, and people will be like, how did you do that? And you're like, well, that was actually pretty easy. But the tuning guitars, that's a tough one. But I mean, all the bands that I work with, or all the people that I meet here in the studio, for example, if they come here to record drums or track vocals or something, and we talk about their process, or they have to go home and start tracking to the drums we did here, I'm like, get yourself a guitar with Evertune. And they're like, no, but it's weird when you can't bend. And I'm like, but you have to. There are people who can tune a guitar and it'll sound fantastic, but it's such a time saver. I can't stress that enough. It's not for gent only or metalcore. I actually, first time I tried it was, I don't know, some years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago, and I was like, okay, well, that's the best invention for guitars in 50 years. And I just ordered, a Telecaster, a 7-string, a 6-string, and I just went on because, okay, so I know I have those, types of guitars in my studio, so we can just, if we need to overdub something, well, we pick up the Telecaster and it's bang on in tune, and we just go. Yeah. And people love that, and when they see it, how it really works in the studio, it's like, you can't go back. I mean, I can't even myself, if I track something, I'm like, no, I don't want to be bothered playing a normal real guitar. I just pick up the one with Evertune, and I'm like, this is so good.
I'm at the point now where I can't even imagine buying a new guitar without an Evertune on.
Me
it
neither.
Just seems like it's the silliest use of my money ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have a bass with Evertune as well? Because those are a thing now, and bass tuning is sometimes even worse than guitars, or like sometimes you think the guitars are out of tune, but it's actually the bass, or sometimes you think the vocals are weird and it's the bass, or some like the bass is often the reason for stuff sounding weird in the mix. And do you have an Evertune bass as well?
I don't, but I wasn't sure that it was. I know they've been talking about that, for years, but is it a thing?
I thought it was, but
I wasn't aware it was a thing yet. I think it's only a prototype still.
Okay, sorry. I thought they released it already.
No, because it was something some guy told me that's a ton of years ago that they were like, they're gonna present it at NAMM, and then something. No, it didn't really. I don't know.
There was a prototype video, I think 2 years ago now. So like they have a physical prototype they're working on.
So sure. But I mean, bass is. I mean, the first thing I do or at least my assistant he does, it's just taking all bass tracks into Melodyne, blink, and tuning them. Because I mean, if like you're saying, if the fundamental notes of the whole mix is not in tune, you're gonna struggle. And it's always like you put it into Melodyne, it's like when you press tune, it's like bloop, it falls down. It's almost like sometimes a half or a semi note sharp. Bass players are tuning like plume, plume, and then let's try. And then they're like hitting the heart, hitting the strings so strong that it's like. But there are ways to fix that, and that's pretty easy. So I'm like, when tracking bass players in the studio, I'm fine being just somewhere, but I normally just actually tune it, a little lower than it's supposed to, because when people start hitting it goes up or gets sharp. So, and I just have an eye on a tuner that's on all the time, and people are just playing, but I know it's gonna go into Melodyne, so I'm not worried.
Right.
As long as it's close, we're good.
I wonder how much of that is like just having the ear or like the taste, as you said, and how much of it develops and comes with experience. Because I'm pretty sure, as sensitive as I am right now, like these days, to tuning issues, I'm pretty sure if I would go back 10 years or so and listen to recordings I did, I'm sure I wouldn't like let those go through these days. Like I'm pretty sure that I would that these are out of tune now to me, and I didn't notice 10 years ago maybe. So I think part of it comes with experience, and that's the hard part, because that is something you just can't do anything about. If people just start recording themselves and they don't have the experience, it's going to be tough, I think.
Yeah. No, but you're totally right. It's the same thing when you listen back to some of your favorite records from 25 years ago, or I'm that old, by the way, or 30, and you're like, this was the best thing. I love this singer, and you realize, oh fuck, it's so pitchy. That's terrible. But on the other hand, it's a great thing, because that means you learn something, or your ears develop, so you can just tell. You can tell things are out of time and out of tune, and it's just pitchy, and it's like, oh shit, were they even rushing that much? I didn't even notice that. Or but it's like you're saying, it's I don't know how you could actually what can you do? I don't know if you could, if there's something you can do. Maybe you can just take a few hours with a person you trust that can tell you, oh no, this is not in tune, or but it's also such a personal thing in some way. If you're a guitarist and you're like, now I've spent like 10 minutes tuning this one perfect, and I start recording and it's not in tune. Some people will hear it, and but maybe this guy doesn't. So how's that even gonna? How can we check?
It is one of those things where getting to work with a good engineer or producer that is on top of tuning is like the best way to learn. You kind of start slowly picking up what they're talking about as you're doing it, and just being told to tune over and over again. And all the little tricks, like, okay, tune that fret, and like tune hold the chord, tune that kind of thing. And then it starts to unlock, I think. But if you haven't had that opportunity, it's a hard thing to learn on your own.
That brings up an interesting question, though, especially the thing you said about your favorite records from like 25 years ago or so. Because where do you draw the line between it's too sloppy or like too pitchy, not in tune, not in time, and when is it like just right, and when is it like maybe too perfect? Because some of those old records are perfect the way they are, even though they are not in tune and not in time. And like people might argue about this. Some like it, some don't, but where do you personally draw the line? Like, what is acceptable, and in which cases is it okay that it's not perfect, and in which cases does it have to be perfect, or does it ever have to be perfect?
Yeah, that's also a little like what is your taste? I mean, when do you personally feel it's perfect? I mean, for me, there was one person, I don't know who I listened to, some podcast with some engineer who said that he wanted his assistant to edit the drums. How was it again? Now I forgot. Maybe. Well, wait a second. Yeah, I mean, superhuman, but not unhuman. You know, it had to be really, really good, but still sound like a human being.
Right.
Mhm.
So, and I feel like that's, even though it doesn't really make much sense, or well, yeah, it's still a taste thing. But I think that this is, for me, it has to sound like this is the guitarist on his very best day. It's like, it's maybe, I mean, it's not to the grit perfect or like that, because that sounds stupid. I've even mixed albums where people were editing, you know, just to the grit, and the guitars were like, and it's just, it stops being music. It's just like playing Nintendo, you know.
Yeah.
And it's that doesn't work for me, and maybe it's also something that is also different from genre to genre. I mean, some more dirty retro stuff could be much more loose and kind of wobbly or hippie-ish, whereas if you do some modern metalcore mix where you have to compete with other, you know, really, really good players, or stuff that's been edited pretty hard, then you have to maybe be a little more hard on the editing. But yeah, I think I kind of decide when I mean, if it's me producing, I kind of decide already when I have a feeling of what is the band that I'm working with? What are we doing? I mean, is it what kind of style and what would fit here? And I have this, not a rule, but you know, when I have my assistants editing drums for me when I'm not doing it myself. I love it, by the way. I love to edit drums. It's a strange thing, but I can't always justify the time, you know, because it does take time. But I kind of, you know, I'm in Pro Tools, so it's called Beat Detective in Pro Tools, right?
Yeah.
And when I edit drums, I'm never over 65 or 60%, somewhere around that. I mean, I'm never 100, because it's I'm like, but why would it ever be 100? but that might be fine for somebody else, or that might work for some other, you know, mixer. I don't know.
Let's maybe explain real quick for people who don't use Pro Tools what that means, because 100 in Beat Detective means that it's perfectly on the grid, right? And like 60%, or it's like a percentage, and like 60% is it moves it closer to the grid, but it stops at a certain point, right?
Yeah. It will actually, I mean, if you have a drum beat going and the drummer was a little sloppy, or there was something that was a little wobbly, and you didn't have the, you know, the relaxed feeling of a drummer that knew what he was doing, and you want to edit that little part, you know, it will still keep some of the feeling of the original take. I think so, at least. And it won't just, you know, tighten it up 100%. And I think that's to me, I think that's a good thing, because even though when you're listening to drums in solo, you feel like, oh, this should actually be really, really perfect. But in the context of the whole band, it as soon as it's just a little tightened up, it starts to feel more like a cohesive band, or a band that actually knows what each other are doing.
The goal.
Yeah. Let's maybe move away from the editing, tuning part a bit, because I mean that is the most common issue and problem. That's why I wanted to talk about it, and that's as Malcolm said before on the show, that's the one thing we still kind of haven't accomplished yet. That we have accomplished a lot with this podcast. Like the results we get from people and the feedback we get is pretty amazing, and some people really improved their recordings, but the tuning thing and some of the editing performance thing, this is still something we don't know how to.
Still hit or miss.
Yeah,
Hit or miss,
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, like there's some takeaways from this episode. There's for our listeners, we've been talking for like 24 minutes right now, and we've been talking probably 22 of those minutes about tuning. So obviously,
right.
this is important. Like, just think about that.
It's really important. And like you're saying, I don't see a solution just right around the corner. And it's also a little where you go like, seriously, does it have to be a software solution, or could people not really learn how to tune a guitar and listen? But I know it takes time. Yeah, it's not.
There's so many things involved. There's so many things involved as well.
Yeah, and it's not so fun. Yeah. It's more fun to just shred away.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. It will. Hopefully, we'll get there.
Yeah. We'll get there.
But
the other
Evertune,
takeaway,
I think that's
exactly. The other takeaway was just get an Evertune. It's such a good investment.
It is.
Yeah. So when it comes to the actual sounds, I heard you talk about that on another podcast where I got the impression that you, and I might be totally wrong, I would just want to ask, that you sort of tell people to, I don't know how to say, record maybe safe signals or stay on the safe side, like record clean stuff, don't risk too much when they record because you can't undo things, but you can always add things. So maybe if people don't have the experience, that it's easier for you to get clean recordings that you can then turn into whatever they want, versus having something that is heavily processed or where like really bold decisions have been made that might sound interesting at first, but tie your hands a little bit later in the process. So I'm just wondering what your opinion is on that. Am I correct that you would recommend to stay on the safe side a little bit? Because Malcolm and I often preach that people should actually commit and be and wear the producer hat and like make bold decisions so that they can come up with unique and exciting art. But yeah, everybody's different here, I guess. So what is your opinion here?
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, and I think what I was trying to avoid is that people, do something and commit to something that was actually a major mistake.
Yeah,
and that's the thing where if it's your first time tracking guitars and you set up an amp and a cab and you put on 7 microphones and you're like, let's go, this is going to be the greatest guitar sound ever. And you're like, yeah, it does sound great. And when I get it, I can just hear phase issues everywhere. It's just that. And if I'm not asking them to, at least track a DI signal.
Yeah.
We're, it's like, oh, they just spent so many hours recording this and now we have to throw it away because it's useless. And that's just sad. So I'd rather have people be a little bit, it's cool when they experiment, and sometimes there's something, they might have a cool guitar pedal, or it could be whatever, which is a good thing. But it's, there are just some basic things that have to be right from the start. So getting a really good DI signal, and then you can always, use all kinds of amps still and track the amp signal, or at least let me hear what was the thought behind that special sound. If I hear it and I'm like, this is so cool, let's use it, it's all good. But if I'm like, the idea is good, but it's just not done right, or it doesn't fit into the mix, or there's maybe something that doesn't really work within the mix context, then I can listen to their idea and just try to replicate it with my amps or with my or whatever, and that I guess that goes for everything. It's not like I'm asking people to not experiment, but it's more like having the chance to go back to just a clean DI signal and reamp. Also, a thing that I've realized is happening quite often, which I'm a little concerned about, is that people obviously track a lot with Kempers, which is great, but they fall completely in love with that Kemper sound, even though it's rubbish. And they're like, can we use this for the album? And I'm like, yeah. Yes and no. But no, you know what I mean. It's like
Totally.
you get so used to hearing, the stuff that you're just, that's maybe it's the only thing you're listening to for 3 weeks when you're tracking guitars for your album.
Yeah.
And then you can't imagine, this is the sound. I love this. This is so great. It's perfect. It sounds just like blah, 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 so amp. And when I listen to it, I only hear cardboard boxes, I'm like, no, it's just not. I mean, it sounds a little arrogant, but yeah, but that's the thing that I see happening often. I'm not saying that I don't want to use people's guitar sound, but I'm just saying that this is maybe something that you dialed in. It maybe took 5 minutes, dialing in on Kemper, and that's, I like this sound. Let's use this for the album. And I would maybe spend, 2-3 hours on choosing the right amp or working with this and, tracking 2 amps at the same time, sending it to the band and saying, do you like this? Or do you feel like we should go with the 5150? Or are we Buckner? Or where are we? And plus actually, if you think about it, you would also be like, but why are they not interested in my experience with amps and miking up guitar cabs? That could be an idea to hear what I at least can do, and A/B with their Kemper sound. But that's also a little bit of a different talk, because then we go into something where they feel very strong about something that's fine, and I can live with it. And if they insist on the Kemper sound, I'm sometimes I'm like, well, right, let's do it. It's their album, it's their record, and I'm fine.
Yeah,
but, this is probably the most ruthless Kemper reaction I've ever heard.
And I thank you, and thank you so much for that, because Malcolm and I have talked about this quite a bit. And Malcolm loves his Kemper, and I had a Kemper twice and sold it twice because I bought one and then I sold it, and I got the one with the power amp because I thought if I can at least use my cabs, but still I sold the second one too. Yeah. So but it's like some people swear by it, so I'm not saying it's not working.
Like, they can totally work, but like I've heard Jacob, I've heard your tones, and like they are what I chase. They're literally what I'm always after.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No, but what I feel like I hear when I hear Kemper sounds, and I've talked to people who love Kemper, and it's not to. I think that the Kemper is such a fantastic tool. It makes so much sense. I mean, it's cool for tracking at home, but in live situations, for me, it's insane. It's so good, and it makes so much sense. I would never ever personally bring out a tube head on tour or play live. And when I sit here, talk to bands, who are like, we're thinking about what to do, and I'm a little bit tired of my big stack, and I'm like, what? This is 2021, and why are you even dragging around a huge head, and you can control this, and you can just switch blah blah blah. And I love it. It's not like I want to slag Kemper.
Yeah.
But that said, I think when you make a really nice guitar tone with whatever amp mic'd up with good cabinets, good preamps, and good mics and things, and you A/B, it's like Kemper just starts to sound plastic, and it sounds more 2D to me than there's no depth in some way. You kind of have a guitar sound that's right in your face, and you don't. It sounds a little weird, but it feels like you can't really hear the air moving. It's just. I mean, for people who don't have the experience of miking up guitar amps, and maybe they don't even have the room or the mic, so then it's a fantastic thing, and it's good. But comparing, it's like, I feel a little bit like, the memes where people are like, this guy is standing with a pot and he goes like, it just sounds just like the real thing. It's fantastic. Yeah. And it was like that. I remember 2001, I worked with, some people, they were like, everything is pot on this album. It sounds fucking amazing. And I'm like, who would do that now? It's just,
right.
and there's a little bit of truth to that this, Kemper is the part of the of our time right now. But of course, it's so much better. But still, it's like maybe in some years we'll be like, what is this weird plastic tone? Maybe not. Maybe it's fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is also we've talked about that as well. It's the IRs, because I actually have heard even pod tones recently where people just used good IRs with an old pod or plugin or whatever, and I was very surprised how much better it sounded just with a great cab or a great IR. And I found the same to be true with the Kemper. I just can't stand the built-in cab sounds, but if you turn the cab off and use a good IR, it's much better. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, it's a matter of taste, but I kind of agree. And I think it's interesting because when we started this podcast today, you were in the process of reamping something.
Yeah.
And we could hear the loud amps in the background. So I assume you still, to this day, use your real amps and not rely on plugins and stuff. Yeah. Because the Kemper is one thing, but there are really, really awesome plugins that, in my opinion, often sound better than the Kemper. They are more like the one-trick ponies, but if you need exactly what they do, there are excellent solutions out there these days. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering in which cases you still prefer your amps, or if there are records where you use a plugin and you really believe it's the best choice.
I think it's maybe 2-3 records where I've mixed ever where it's not real amps. It sounds weird, but it is, and I'm the funny thing is that I'm very often thinking when I build a mix and I start and I put in the guitars, I'm very often trying an amp sim, and in the beginning I'm like, this is pretty cool and this might work, and maybe this is the album where it's gonna be this and that amp sim, and then I get a little further into it and I'm like, no, this is so thin. What the what the hell? And there's also something, because I love stacking guitars, or it's sometimes or very often I ask people to record 4 rhythm guitars because I love the fatness. So I use different amps for maybe even every track, and just the stacking of that just makes it huge. And as soon as I start stacking with amp sims, I feel like it just gets into face hell, because there's something strange about it. It's not two very different performances will sound kind of similar in an amp sim, and it's weird to me. I don't know why. So I even though they're great sounding, and I'm also constantly buying new amp sims whenever they hit the market. I'm like, and press buy, because it's maybe this is the one. And or people are always like, now this new one is out. This one feels just like the real thing, and I'm I jump on it and buy it. But I haven't yet,
right.
It hasn't ended on an album. Maybe as overdub guitars, and that's fine. Or for solos, it's cool.
Right.
And clean and crunch. It's just so much faster than me dialing in a good crunch sound or a clean sound. That's a little bit of that's actually harder than making a high gain sound, I think.
It's interesting to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Because there's so many variables,
Totally.
when it starts to get into that territory. Are we, what is a clean sound? That's a lot of different things. Well, to me it is, but yeah.
The thing for me about amp sims and Kemper and Quad Cortex now, amp effects, or Axe effects, all those different ones, is I think a huge advantage for me is like just the time saving aspect of it. Like where I've got one day to track way too many guitars with a band. It's like we're going to be able to get something that sounds awesome within the first 15 minutes and then be tracking. And then, as long as we have that DI, like you've recommended here, we're not powerless in changing that, but at least we have something awesome to get us going and do a really good job with. I've got a story. I recently did a guitar session. We had a 5150 sitting beside me. So I had that going out to a cab. I had one of those torpedo captures going as well. So we were grabbing the head and running an IR loader. I then had a 5150 on my Kemper going, and I had the neural Nolly plugin with their 5150 up. And we started at the amp, and we ended up burning through them all and landing on the Nolly plugin. And again, we were moving quick, really quick. So it was just like, turn it all on. Which one do we like? And it was like, okay, the $150 option's what we're running with today.
But that's cool, and it's fantastic. And that's also what I'm actually. Sometimes I get so frustrated that I have to spend time on reamping. I'm like, but imagine if I could just put on that plug and just factory default and just go, or whatever, or that would be amazing. But I feel like it's not really there yet. But
yeah, well, your results really do speak for themselves. I think your guitars are just massive.
But I also hear some really cool mixes where I'm 100%. It's amp sims, so it's not like it can't be done. It's just me. I don't know. I'm stuck in the 80s.
Whatever gets you there, though, right? It's like whatever gets the result is fine. That brings me to a question for you. Is reamping part of your mixing process? Like, is that just something that you consider to be part of mixing, or is it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I sometimes people ask me, or do you charge extra? But it's just a part of the price, and
part of making a process.
Yeah, and it's easy. I can just set up a session and just my studio is next to my home, and I can just, when I leave for the day, I can just press record, and it'll. Of course, when I have to change amps, I gotta go out and press the switch and change the head for the next guitar or whatever. But I can just make a session, so I can reamp during the night, and that's cool. It's ready for the next day, and we're good. Yeah,
I mean I think. What's really interesting about this whole conversation is that if people wonder whether it's worth hiring a mix engineer or not these days, because many people think they or want to mix themselves as well, that doesn't stop at the recording. And everything you just said, the amount of care and time and effort you put into making it like the best it can be is, I mean that clearly shows the value in, or part of the value that's in hiring a mixing engineer. That really is something you just can't do yourselves. And that alone should be, I think, a reason enough to just try it and work with someone really experienced, because you just don't do that at home. You don't have the experience, you don't have the gear, you don't, you're not as objective anymore. You just simply cannot put as much effort and care into it as someone like Jacob can. And I think that really, everything you just said, like really shows me how much better off most people are hiring a mix engineer versus mixing themselves if they are not as experienced. And I'm wondering what your opinion is there, because I mean, some people can mix pretty well, but I believe that unless you work on a lot of different things, like if you're only mixing your own band and that's all you ever did, and you are lacking the experience, I think it's going to be very, very hard to ever beat a professional mix by someone like you. So I don't know, have you ever heard a mix that a band did themselves where it was actually really great and sounded like a competitive record?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes, well, it's hard to say, and it's also, I mean, first of all, I think it's always a budget question. Yeah. I mean, it's always totally. Like people approach me and go like, okay, so what, how much is a full production? And when I tell them the price, they maybe can afford one day.
Yeah.
No, not that I'm extremely expensive, but you know what I mean. They're not. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense for them to do it. So they have to figure out alternatives and what's the best way. And I mean, I would never recommend a band, starting to mix their own stuff. Well, unless they had a lot of experience with that. And some people do get started and or end with a mix that they kind of like, and they send it to me for mastering only because that was what they could afford, which is also fine. But then I sit there sometimes with with a mix that has so many obvious, flaws or problems, where I'm like, this is, too bad. Well, and that's where I go like, okay, so let's fix some issues here, and but that's also very problematic to go into this. I mean, if I'm supposed to be a mastering engineer and I'm suddenly a mix consultant, remote mix consultant or something,
happens often.
But yeah. So it's also that's rough, and sometimes we land on a middle ground where I get stems and I can fix some things, and I can work on can you give me kick snare so I can at least, you know how it is.
Yeah, that is also dangerous though, because the stem mastering sometimes people have the expectation of getting a mix, but they just send stems because it's cheaper. So like they will hire you for stem mastering, but they actually expect a mix. At least in my experience, sometimes that's the case.
Yes.
So if it's to fix a master, then it's totally fine. It's a great option. But if it's just trying to get a cheaper mix, it's a little sometimes a little difficult.
Yeah, and very often I see myself, going way into mixing territory, even with a stem mastering, because I want this to be good. It's
of course.
It's just I can't let this go. I just can't. And sometimes it's just I don't know. It is a little crazy, and that's where I feel like sometimes I maybe I talk to the band and I'm like, so how much time have you spent on the mix? And they'll be, I think 2-3 months or so. Maybe not every day, but you know what I mean. So I'm like, your time is so poorly spent.
Yeah,
actually. But I've of course I get it, because you also want to learn, and maybe you can do better next time. And I was probably the same when I started. That I just took the time to learn stuff, and maybe it wasn't good in the beginning, and maybe if I send it to a mastering engineer who would be like, "Oh my God, this sucks on so many levels." But you have to learn it at some point. But you're right that the important thing is to, where are you spending your time and money the best way, and that's where I think it's very good to at least, for me, just send me a mail and be like, okay, this is what we're thinking, and this is what we have, this is our budget, and how can you help us get the most out of the money? And I would guide them to do many maybe weird things. Maybe sometimes I'm like, a drummer is like, but we have the rehearsal room, and I can borrow this suitcase of microphones that is, and I'm like, oh my God, I can just feel where this is going. and then I'm like, but listen, even though it's not what you want to hear, but the best thing was to go on a music store website, buy a decent electronic kit, record everything with superior drummer, give me the MIDI signals, and let me, I can even, maybe even help them edit or quantize, and I can just, put in the sounds that I like and that I know will fit within this mix. And this will give them, in the shortest amount of time, so, amazing quality. And it will be really cheap. And they can easily punch in. It's MIDI, you know what I mean? There are so that's actually, it's no fun, because drummers are like, it's fun to hit on, real heads, and I know how it is, but it's just, you don't have the money yet, but let's do it this time, and right. Let's do it like that. Buy an E kit, rent it or borrow it from a friend or whatever, and make the drums like that. And even cymbals are sounding so good now. It's much better to use sample cymbals that are sampled really well than trying to record it with 257s, and have no experience at all, or maybe choose the wrong ones, because that's also a thing that I would do in a drummer situation. In my studio, we would be discussing cymbals, and he would be like testing this crash, and I would be like, no, and he will be, no, that sounds weird for this part, and it's all these small things. So yeah, so I know that the bands are so eager to do it like the real thing, but maybe it's not the smartest way. So I encourage everyone to either hit me up or just someone who can tell them what is the best way and cheapest way to get to a result that actually can compete with everything else that's out there,
Right.
but for a fraction of the price. And it's not hard. It's not that hard if you just do the right thing from the beginning.
Cool.
I
Thank
think.
you. Yeah, you're right. Like, and again, the amount of care and attention to detail, you can just tell from what you were just saying. Like, I think many people don't even realize that you can or you should shoot out symbols or maybe change symbols for different parts or songs. Like, I think that's some bands don't even realize that this is a thing and you should be doing that. So this is where your expertise comes in. And even if you're not producing it, you can still guide them through the process and help them with those things. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, where do you see the future of home recording go then? Because all of that, I mean, there are all these options these days and all these great ways to solve these problems, which is great. And it enables and empowers so many people to make great records. But at the same time, a lot of people are afraid that that music is sort of maybe losing some of the vibe and character, because everybody uses e-kits and amp sims and stuff. And maybe they hire you and you can turn that into something really exciting. But still, are you also like worried that it's going to take away from the soul or whatever from the music? Is the future, what do you envision the future of music and home recording like with all that development?
Yeah, I don't know. It's to me, it's not a thing that I worry about. I'm not the type, I think, that is like, oh, it's killing music and now too much stuff is coming out. And I'm not like, I actually love that these days you can buy a laptop and an interface and you can just go start recording and make your own albums. And even the way the music business works these days, where you can make an album and just upload it, and here it is, to the rest of the world without any gatekeeper who will be sitting there and saying, no, this is nothing the market won't, I love that. It's
totally agree.
It's a great thing. And sure, there will maybe be a little bit of, there will always be a little bit of preset generation music, right? Where everybody's like, oh, so what's the preset for and they press that button and they just go with it. But still, it might be cool music just with a preset sound. So I'm not. I mean, just more power to people that can be creative at home and wherever. It's fantastic. I love the fact that it's so easy now, and that's also what I'm. When bands are approaching me and going like, yeah, we need to do this record, and how are we doing that? I even had a band calling me last week about a production, and they're like, they don't have the time to go into the studio, with small kids and families and jobs and things, and the budget is maybe not as it was once, and I'm like, well, I mean, why don't you just record it yourself? It's really not. It's not like I want to talk everybody into coming to my studio. Of course, that would be, in a perfect world. Yeah, we should all be doing that, and I would guide and help and do the best that I can. But I also like that I can just tell people, no, it's fine, just do it at home, and they'll be like, but vocals, and it's not rocket science. I mean, send me a picture of how you're standing in front of the mic, and send me a test signal, and I can tell you right away. Mm-hmm. And if you're even, I think I said that in some other podcasts, but I even have a bunch of preamps and compressors lying around. So when people are like, yeah, we're maybe tracking at home for this album, but I'm not really sure. And I'm like, yeah, I'll send you my compressor and my EQ and my preamp. You can just borrow it until you're done. It's fine.
Awesome. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it's such an easy thing to do for me, and I can even, I can dial it in. They can just, we can just talk about how do you let me see the needle. How is it? Yeah, it looks fine. Great, because I know that I'll get a signal that I'll like, because it's got some of my sound is already there, and I even borrow people a mic, or I tell them go out and buy a secondhand whatever,
right,
U87 or something, and I think that's such a cool thing to be able to do, and just the fact that more and more bands are doing this makes me happy, because of course it's great when they come here, and it's cool to. I mean, I lose a little bit of the social interaction, of course, and that's a little bit of a drawback. But I'm totally fine with people sending me stuff as long as it's done well. And I think these days it's so easy to do well. Interfaces are cheap. You can buy a cheap laptop, and imagine if you take a studio budget and you're not spending it on the studio, or you have a little bit of a budget, say like 2,000 euros or maybe a little more, and you just spend it on a few select pieces of gear or rent something, imagine what you actually can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Agree.
I'm just happy that everything is just so much easier for self-recording bands, and what is even better is a podcast like this. If people would stop reading weird things and
Amen.
Yeah, well,
Yep.
but that's maybe how it is, and because I hear some crazy things sometimes that people think they have to do.
8 microphones on a guitar amp. But when you said that, I was like, that's the one. That's the one. More mics is better, right?
Yeah, of course. And face hell will arise.
So, I mean, sometimes the advice is not even bad. It's just wrong for the type of person who reads it. Like sometimes the advice could be good for you or me or Malcolm, but if someone records for the first time, they might be completely overwhelmed with it and use it the completely wrong way. And so that there's that. And like the internet, of course, it's completely unfiltered, and whatever you stumble across, you can only hope that it's the right information for your situation. So
and a lot of myths from older days of recording, where you have to do it like this and never ever blah 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 and stuff, which is maybe some of it is the truth, and some is just no, you don't do that anymore, or but it's
Or you see advice from people who are at a level that is nowhere near what the most people are, and they are speaking from a situation where they get very well prepared and excellently recorded tracks, which is a completely different situation. So if people seek mixing advice, for example, and they watch some A-list mixer do their thing, those source tracks are probably not the same type of track that you get to work with in the beginning and stuff like that. Some of the things might just not be applicable, or you might have to solve a lot more problems than they have. And
you're totally right. And in some weird way, I kind of like that I have been a part of solving so many stupid problems for a long time. I can really remember when I was recording drums for I don't know, maybe 10 years, where I was like, my drums sound so bad all the time. And I was fighting to get it better and better. And then I had to do a cool German band, actually. And they came in with, a fantastic drummer. And he, it was new hits and everything was in tune, and he knew his kit. And I was like, holy shit, this sounds so good. Because I realized that I've actually been fighting and doing, learning how to optimize really poorly sounding kits. It never dawned on me that you should have new hits. I didn't think about that. I wasn't, people came in with a drum kit, and I was like, sure, I'll put on mics. And I don't know why. How it is. You kind of, in the beginning.
We all did that.
Yeah, but what I'm also saying is that if this guy came in as the first one I recorded, I wouldn't have learned all the tricks how to get, poor drummers sounding better than they really are. And then when a good drummer comes in, it sounds fantastic. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So it's actually great to be able to learn all these tricks, how to fix, poorly recorded whatever, or just trying to make something out of a mess instead of just going, well, I can't do anything, so I'll just pull the faders up and this is how it sounds.
Yeah.
So I, even though I want people to, be better at recording themselves, and of course makes sense, but I think it's a good way as a mixer to learn and experiment and get really good at turning shit into gold.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Some of my favorite mixes this year have been self-recorded tracks that have been sent to me, and it forces me to do things differently. Just like, I don't have the wall of guitars to do my usual thing to. I have to make it sound big a different way, and that's led to some like really cool discoveries for me.
Yeah.
I also think you are the type of person, Jacob, where I find it so impressive that at the level you are, you still just continuously keep learning and studying and trying new things, and you. It seems like, it's impressive because you could think you just don't have to do that anymore because you know how to do everything properly, but you still keep educating yourself. You still seem like someone who tries to experiment, try new things, and you are not 100%. You feel like you're still not 100% there yet with everything you do, probably, and that is something that is also really remarkable. And I think that people should pay attention to that because. The best of the best are that type of person usually, and they just constantly try to solve these problems and try to figure out new ways to do this and never stop learning. So
yeah, I agree. I think it's important that there should always be this. I mean, in fact, it should be like every time at least in my head, every time you end a record, you'll be like, now I know what to do on the next one. Yeah. This one is cool, but now, because you have to, I feel like you have to learn constantly. And I'm trying, even though I've been doing this for many, many years, I'm trying to follow new trends or see, okay, so how's this guy actually doing this? Or just constantly figuring out, is there something I could do better, with this sound or this type, or maybe, should I, obsessing over drums, and maybe this way of tuning is cooler, or, it's important. It's really important to be constantly learning. And also as a band or a musician, I would say that if you kind of feel like, I'm fine on my level now, you're like, ooh, it's a little bit of But I mean, I even heard this I don't know if it's true, but I heard this story where, I don't know if you know, Jeff Loomis is a fantastic guitarist who's in Arch Enemy now, and he was at a certain point, I heard that he was taking lessons, which is like,
I heard that too.
And that's just, I mean, he's like, oh, hey, look at me, I'm the world's best guitarist in metal, and I need lessons. This makes so much sense. So you just can't stop, learning new tricks and things. It's very important. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Any particular success stories that you remember where because Malcolm, you said some of your favorite records that you've worked on in the last couple of months were self-recorded. Do you, Jacob, have any or remember any particular sessions, records that you're really proud of where the band did a lot themselves? Something that turned out really, really awesome?
I can't even remember. But actually, these days there are much more self-recorded mixes that I do than produced, where everything is done by me actually. So it's more or less all of them.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of rare that people are doing a full album with me nowadays, because it's there can be so many reasons for that, there's a lot of bands who are actually good at recording stuff themselves. So and I can't really
Okay.
I don't know if there's any favorite, but there,
No,
but
I don't
there
have
are
to
so
play
many.
favorites. So that
Right.
No, but what I mean is that when people, for example, if people mention Evergrey, which I've done a lot of albums, they record, they record at a studio. They have an engineer help them set up. Jakob Hermann, for example, at Top Floor in Gothenburg, and he sets up stuff, and they just do everything else themselves, and they're good at it. It's very well done. And then Tom Englund, the singer, goes home and he records his vocals in his own home studio, and everything is just meticulously made, and everything's just very nice. So it's just a dream for him as a mixer to get these tracks, and it's just everything's so well done and nothing is out of tune.
Yeah.
No, but what I mean is it's fantastic that people are actually so good at it when it's not their everyday job. They're
Right.
doing this, every second year, maybe for 2-3 weeks. So there's hope.
There is. Okay, Malcolm, anything you wanna add to this? Because I have so many questions in mind. I think I could go on for hours, but is there anything that's on your mind? Still?
I'm sure I could keep you all day, Jacob. And again, thank you so much for coming on. It's just totally
Yeah, you're
amazing.
so welcome. I'm having fun.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning
That's good to
Evergrey too.
hear.
Like, honestly, some of those Evergrey records are just like my favorite guitar tones ever.
Oh,
And
thanks.
so it's amazing hearing that they're so hands-on with their own stuff. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I got to ask, actually, Evertune's involved in
I
their
don't
thing? 'Cause
think
they're-
so, actually.
Wow, they're so remarkably in tune.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
Um,
but they're fantastic players, all of them.
Oh,
really,
yeah.
and
Incredible.
they've been around forever, and I think they've just gotten good at recording themselves. And it's the drummer Jonas who's really in charge of the recordings, and he's good at this stuff. So he
Very
knows
cool.
when it's not in tune, or yeah. But
Actually,
yeah,
I do have one more nerdy question for you. Just you mentioned that you like quad guitars a lot, where you have 4 rhythms, right?
Yeah.
I guess you're doing 2 left, 2 right. Do you
Yeah.
like it to be the same guitar for intonation stuff, or do you like the guitar to be swapped out between those takes?
I mean, I very often use the same guitar. Actually, it doesn't have to be another one. It's cool if it works, but in let's say before Evertune, it was kind of impossible. I thought it was really hard to have 2 guitars. I mean, if you wanted to track 2 guitars with this type of guitar and then 2 with the other ones, they would be out of intonation all the time, and you would be like fighting. And I would sometimes live with it, but I wasn't a fan of it. So I would always more or less try to have at least, the same guitar, and sometimes even the same guitarist playing all 4 to get everything pretty well locked in. But with Evertune, it's, I mean, you can almost pick up, any guitar and just dub it with different ones. And that I like the way that the wall of sound gets even more, thick or whatever, or wherever you want to go with adding a different guitar as your third and fourth guitar. So sometimes I would even say, let's do 2 with a really heavy humbucker, maybe active, whatever sound, and then dub it with a Telecaster, or a P90 pickup, or something that sounds much more transparent in some way, and it's not humbucker. Like I like that as well. So
Cool.
2 different guitars are cool, but the main thing is the tuning. If it's not in tune or it doesn't intonate, then it's problematic. It'll be
Always
chorus
lost, yeah.
hell.
You said something interesting here, and that is like single coil pickups in metal. That is something many people don't even try or think about, and I think it can work really well. Especially the P90 is a great pickup, and so I'm wondering, is that often the case? Is it only for doubles or quad tracking, or do you enjoy tracking with a say stock Telecaster, for example?
Yeah, I do it a lot. It's actually something I feel like is a little bit of a no-go for many bands. If I say, okay, I have an idea, and they're like, no, ooh. And I'm like, you're so missing out. and I think I do that a lot. When I produce stuff, I'm very often like, oh well, let's play this riff on this, or if it has a split the guitar, so we can have this single coil, really twangy sound on top of it, or maybe play that riff on the. It's so cool, and people are like, no, I never, Sometimes it can be a little bit of a fight to get people understanding how cool it actually is to dub stuff with different types of pickups and different types of guitars, and even if it gets a little crazy, even different tunings and different voicings, which is very much that gets a little complicated at times, and also more for chord stuff than riffing. But riffs are, I mean, I've tried, many times, maybe almost dubbing a full album with a Telecaster, all the riffing, and it's so cool. And the guy that I introduced it to at that time, he was not really happy about it in the first place. But then when he heard that, what it gives to the whole sound, it's amazing. I love it. So I think that is something where, of course, it requires a little bit of experience, and you have to know what you're looking for. But I think that this is a place where a lot of bands or guitarists are actually missing out, that they're so focused on humbucker sound, and it's always the bridge, where I would, let's do the verse on the neck pickup, and I love this, experimenting with the small tonal changes that can be in a guitar, and so I do that a lot, and I do a lot of, when the chorus hits, there'll be just big chords on a Telecaster or whatever with a P90 or stuff like that. That's amazing. Yeah,
clarity and the attack is awesome, and
yeah,
totally cool. Now, other than everything we've been talking about on this episode, is there any pieces of advice that you would give to any DIY band, like something we've missed but that is absolutely crucial for you, or anything you always tell bands because you just have to, or you feel like it's the most important thing?
Yeah, well, there are so many things. I mean, one thing that I feel like has been a little, or can be a little weird at times, even though you kind of try to teach the bands or the producers of the bands, file delivery is also a thing. I guess you've also, I don't know if you've had a whole episode about that, but that's an episode in itself.
3 weeks ago, I think we did that.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Okay. But that's maybe something that can really destroy things, when of course, not just naming tracks and all this, just having like making sense of a session, or just, naming tracks the right way, organization, just basically, but just the delivery. So I'm often telling bands, please, make sure that you deliver it this way, because this is the way that works for me and my assistant. And they're like, nah, no, we'll just deliver it on something weird, like some Russian site where you can pick it up and press download 50 times, and I'm like, no, or Google Drive, like, oh my god,
Google Drive with permissions not enabled or stuff like that.
Yes. And I think that's also a tough thing, because I feel like, well, it was in my, I send out a PDF to bands that I work with, and I'm like, it's in there, and didn't you read it? And maybe they did, but they're like, but I like this better. Yeah. So you're like, okay, well, how do we do this? And sometimes I'm like, okay, I sit there and wait for Google Drive to zip one stupid file, or it's so what? And even worse is that the thing is that sometimes, when I mean, things are really, really fast at my place here. Everything goes so fast that if I might miss something. Sometimes it's like, oh, by the way, you kind of, you mix and you're like, oh, by the way, was there a solo for this sent by this other guy who, wait a sec, how was it? And that's, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then you start looking and you look through mails and you're like, no, that was not on a mail. Was that in Messenger? And, you know,
let me check Facebook.
Oh my God. And they didn't put it into Dropbox, so it's not there. And these things, this is just where I feel like bands are just wasting their money or, you know, my time. If I spend, you know, sometimes I can, you know, if I have 15 minutes, I can maybe make a perfect drum sound in 15 minutes. No, I'm not saying that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And if I spend 15 minutes on looking for a file, it's such a waste of time. But that's something that, I'm not saying it's all bands, but there are a lot of bands who refuse to. It's like, and it's sometimes like I'm telling them, okay, so can we please use Dropbox because that works really well for me and my assistant. It's set up in a way that it's just perfect for us. Mm-hmm. And they're like, but I don't have the, you know, I don't have the money for it, or
yeah,
and I'm like, but you're paying me a lot of money to mix this, and out of that budget, couldn't you? I mean, I can't even believe you didn't. Why didn't you sign up for just for a short period of time to have the full Dropbox or whatever? It's just like sometimes where priorities are just out the window. They're like, no, it's fine. I can just put it into Messenger and you can just download it from Messenger or whatever. And I'm like, oh shit.
It's hard because on the one hand, we want to remove the friction as much as possible when we work with clients, and we want to make it smooth and easy for them, of course. But on the other hand, as you said, it's such a waste of time if we have to do all these things that we shouldn't be doing. We should focus on the art instead. So it's hard sometimes, but at the same time, it's not, because as you said, it's easy to sign up for some service like that, or to just follow your guidelines. I'm sure I'm sure there's plenty of like hand holding involved where people just need to follow what you tell them and then they'll be fine.
Actually, yes. Yeah. It's not that hard. But of course I see that people have their habits of working with files and they kind of continue with that if it's a habit they have within the band with their file sharing system, or they have, we always use Google Drive, which is fine. But if I ask for, you know, please do not, and please use this, they should know that this is actually pretty important. Yeah, it's just not something I'm saying because I'm, you know, I like this.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, that can be a struggle at times. And it's even with with bigger clients that it can be a problem. And
it's everyone.
I don't know. I don't know if
it's other audio engineers even.
Oh yeah, well,
it's everyone.
But yeah, then again, it's of course shit happens, and you saw me fumbling with the Bluetooth device in the beginning, so it can happen for anyone. Yeah. And it's embarrassing, but no, it as long as people actually or bands try to pay attention to what the mixer says, or I know there's a lot of. I mean, I've seen papers sometimes when I've sent out stuff that I produce for other mixes where I'm like, oh, this is a 10-page PDF. This is crazy. But please read it. It is, you know, it's important information, and there's no reason if you want to, you know, start on the right path with this mixer that you've hired, then please, you know, follow the instructions. It can't be that hard, you know.
And there's a reason for it. People need to understand what you just said, that it's not because you want to, you want to torture them with your instructions, but it's they are actually getting more for them, for their budget, for their money, because you have to spend less time on like all these things, and you can focus more. You can, it's better for the end result, and they just get more for their money, and it's really worth paying attention to that and doing that. And it's not just because you want it that way and there's no benefit in it for them. There is actually.
No. Yeah, and it's like, I could have delivered a mix to you today, but I didn't because I spent like 1 hour looking for the files, and then I had to download it from MediaFire or it's
good advice.
wonderful.
Thank you.
I've got a golden rule that I've been putting in that nobody does, and it's just if you're sending me something to mix, you have to export the files and then re-import them into a blank session, and your song should be there, right?
Yeah.
Nobody ever does it.
No.
It's like you didn't do this because it doesn't work. When I bring it in,
No.
I can tell that everything's out of time.
It's such a classic where you get a session file, and of course, I know when everything's stressed and maybe you work till 3 a.m. on the deadline of the mix, and you panicked and you just sent your session, and I then the whole drum kit is missing, and I can tell from the when I follow the pad, it's on your desktop at home. It's not here, but it works here. And I'm like, yes, I know, but still,
Yeah, that's why sending sessions is most often not the best way to do it anyways.
No, and I try not to receive sessions, even though people are in the same DAW as I am. I'm like, please, well, sometimes we can just, if I have the time for people to send a test session, we can try it, and see if it works. But
Generally
more
not.
often than not, it's like, don't send me a session. Just send me the WAV files, and
That's one thing people see a lot when they follow these big A-list mixers and they watch their tutorials, where they always talk about like they open the client session and they have to have all the same plugins because the plugins are in the session, and they have all these things the producer did, and some of them they keep and some of them they replace. And it seems like that is the way to work, but that's again only because these people work with other like really great producers, and like maybe that's the way they do it, but it's not applicable to most DIY scenarios. Like it's not going to happen most of the time. And
you're totally right. And this is for me, most of the time it's a red flag if people are like, I'm going to send you the session because it's got a lot of cool plugins, so you can just start there. And I'm like, it's just nightmare. Oh God, no, I can't. I need, my way of doing it. And they're actually, you're not paying me to work in your session. That's not making any sense. No. So for sure, I mean, if there's something in there that they like, they can always just print the track, just process it, and with their little plugin on it, and say, this is what I got. Maybe you can use it, maybe you can't. We'll see. Yeah. But yeah, so of course it's just the basic rule of please read what it actually says in the information PDF that I sent, or the mixer sent to you, and even though it can be long, sometimes, but it's such an important thing. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Cool. I want one thing I want to say before we wrap this up is that I don't want this episode to come across as like totally negative or complaining all the time about people, about bands. Because I think it doesn't. But I just want to say that we really love working with like bands who record themselves, of course. And it's only we're saying these things because we're so passionate about making it the best it can be and turning it to the best it can be. And that's why we want to save you from making these mistakes, and we are explaining all these pitfalls to you. So don't take it as like negativity or complaining from our end. It's just we can do such a better job, and we can serve you and your songs better if you follow these things that Jacob and us have to try to describe in this episode. So
absolutely,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, or at least I can speak for myself. Yeah. I just want to help. It can come across a little when I'm like, why would you even, but it's actually not. It is because I so want to get into the mixing part, where I am creative. I don't want to fumble about with all kinds of untuned things, but of course this happens. Like we've talked about it, but it's just because I'm so ready to work on this and make this the best it can be. And if the obstacles are just, if there are just heaps of them because they didn't, read a PDF that I sent, then it's just, that's just too bad. Yeah. So no, it's not that we're just bashing everyone doing DIY recordings. Not at all. I mean, it's also maybe it's well, let's say every time I get a DIY session, there's maybe just one or two problems. It's not like it's 50.
Yeah.
Very rarely it's like nothing can be used. I mean, you probably also know that. So it's maybe this one little thing, and sometimes it's even like you can just send a mail to them and go like, "Is it easy for you to change this little thing?" And they'll sometimes be, "For sure, yeah."
Mhm.
Then do it, because it's gonna make everything so much better. And yeah. So it's actually, I mean, we are here to help.
Definitely.
We're not here to bash people and make them sell their laptops and their interfaces
No,
and their
not at-
guitars, because they're out of tune.
Yeah. Just no more guitar music.
maybe that if they get an Evertune instead, like
Yeah, it makes sense.
yeah. All right. Well,
Awesome.
thank you again for taking the time, Jacob. This was a really insightful, helpful episode, I think. Malcolm, you want to add anything?
No, just
we wrap it up?
again, thank you for taking the time. I have no idea how late it is over there.
It's
I'm
only
the odd one out.
5:30.
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah. And you what time is it at your?
It is
place?
now 8:35 a.m. for me over in Canada
Okay.
here. Yeah, so
All
not
right.
too bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We're all
not
doing
bad.
good then.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
This is
It's all
great.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Just thank you so much for taking the time coming on. Yeah, big fan of your work, of course, as well. So
Thanks.
I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
Yeah. And by the way,
Cool.
you did a cool interview with Malcolm in his other podcast, Your Band Sucks at Business. So people, you want to check that out as well, because I've listened to it and it's awesome. It's so much valuable information in there for most of you, I think. It's so yeah, go over to yourbandsucksatbusiness.com and look for the episode with Jacob. You're going to enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. We talked a lot about the relationship between a producer and the band and the interband relationships, and just keeping people happy and creative in the process. So if that sounds good to you, go check that out.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Jacob.
Awesome.
It's been a
You're
blast.
welcome.
And where should we send people to if they want to check out your work? Where can people find you the easiest way?
I have a fine homepage, which is www.jacobhansen.com. And I have an Instagram account as well, which is just Hansen_Jacob, all in small letters. And that's probably the best way. And
Awesome.
so hit me up if you have any questions, or if you want to work with me, I'm here waiting.
Yeah. Do that, people. I'm going to put that in the show notes. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com/74, this will be the show notes for this episode. There you'll find all these links. And yeah, check out Jacob's work. It's phenomenal. And if you're into metal, you probably know a lot of what he's done. And go check it out. Hit him up. You're not going to regret it.
Definitely.
Hopefully not.
No, not at all. All right. Thank you, Jacob. Have a nice
You're
day.
welcome. So welcome.
Nice
You
week.
too.
Bye.
Yeah.